Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Seth Grossman, the Chief of Staff here at AU. We appreciate you taking the time to join today's webinar. Our goal for today is for the university's leadership, or a component of it, to provide additional information and answer some common questions that have come up after Friday's announcements about some next steps we're taking in response to the impacts from COVID-19. We're joined today, as you can see, by President Burwell, Provost Dan Myers, Fanta, the Vice President of Campus Life and Inclusive Excellence, and Doug Kudravetz, Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, and Treasurer. We really appreciate everyone who submitted questions in advance today. We received a wide number of questions, and we're going to answer the ones that have come up most frequently during our time here today, including questions related to what staff and faculty can expect over the next few weeks in the summer, what we're thinking about financial planning, and how the university is approaching making a decision about the fall. We won't get to all the questions that folks submitted, but this is just the first step in our communication with you. We're going to have additional outreach, including expanding the FAQs that are available on the website. But before we turn to questions, President Burwell is going to kick us off with some opening remarks. Sylvia.
Seth, thank you. And just hello, everybody, and a huge thank you. That's where I want to start, is with a thank you to our incredible community and all that you all have done over the last, it's more than a month now, in terms of where we are as a university during a really challenging time. And I know, that time is challenging professionally, but it's also challenging personally. I think everybody knows I have a 10 and a 12-year-old. I actually never took Spanish. I am trying to learn and help our daughter, with her Spanish. Thank goodness I did take Latin. It's a little helpful. But the strain and stress, whether that's with your children, whether that's others that you have in your home, whether that's supporting family members, and I'm sure all of us know people who have had COVID-19, and I'm sure many of us actually know people who have passed. And so the stress and the strain of this time has been extreme. And so that makes us all the more appreciative of how we've come together as a community and across everything, from the fact that in a very, very, very short period of time, all of our classes went online. What that took from our faculty, the incredible effort of our faculty, to take what they were doing, to put it up online, to support the students as they are going up online, which is challenging. I know I see it in my own household in terms of our children trying to do this kind of learning, and know how much our faculty is doing to support that effort beyond just the teaching that they are doing on a day-to-day basis. Our students who, even in the middle of all of this, our students, as they were both moving out and getting themselves up online, gave us a lot of input on what to do about commencement, so that we could make that decision with their input. Our incredible staff, and the staff that helped us get over 3,000 students safely out of their residence halls and to their homes over a period of time, hearing each of the things they needed, helping both the faculty and the staff that got our students from abroad home. I could go on and on in terms of the efforts of this community. Our alumni. Many of you may not know that our alumni started a fund to help our students, those students who needed to travel home or were having difficult economic circumstances at that critical moment. They put together funds that we were able to use to support our students. So thank you for all of that. I know today we're with faculty and staff, and thank you all so much for everything that everybody has done. I do just want to spend a minute or two on our COVID response, and then we'll get to a lot of other things, I think, in questions. And some of the things I wanted to say, as we've worked through this time period, there have been some principles that have been guiding us. Number one, and the first one, is the health and safety of our community. And that is first and foremost. And in our decision making, the health and safety of our community. Second, achieving our mission. We are here as an institution of both learning and scholarship. And how do we think about how what we do impacts that fundamental mission? A third element of our decision making is our role in a broader community. And by that, I mean, I think everyone knows that in a pandemic, an epidemic outbreak of infectious disease, it is the entire community that must participate and support us getting to a solution. And so what's our role in that, both from the perspective of health, but also the perspective of economics as we think about our impact as one of the larger employers in Washington, D.C. And finally, the issue of finances and financial sustainability of the university. Those are the principles that we've been working against and focusing on as we make decisions like the decisions that we announced on Friday. And I also want to just mention that, you know, what we are trying to do is as soon as we get decisions, communicate them, and communicate them in lots of different ways. If you're faculty, I'm sure you've heard from your deans more than usual in terms of the deans are having cascading that information as we get it. Our vice presidents are spending time with their folks. Different departments are spending time with their folks so that we keep moving that messaging as soon as we get it. We know that we can't answer every question and that we can't give certainty on everything, but what we're trying to do is get input, make decisions as quickly as we can, and then move that information out to everyone. So that gives you a little sense of what we're doing and how we're going about this decision making. I'll probably spend a little more time on some more details of that in the questions, but wanted to make sure that you all had a sense of that. And I think hopefully everyone had a chance to look at the memo. The memo, I think, tells us some important things, including the estimates of what the current decisions to date have cost us, which are $27 million as a university, which is quite a large impact. But we are working on how to work through that impact and make sure that we can continue moving forward as a university, taking into account that impact as we do that and making sure that we continue with our mission and the health and safety of our community.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. Now turning to questions. First question is, what can our employees expect after June 30th? And Sylvia, will turn back to you for that one.
Thank you. Thanks, Seth. The question of what happens after June 30th, I will be honest and say, we don't know yet. What we've tried to do is give as much certainty for as long a period as we can. And the process by which we are bringing together information and the information that helps guide us about what happens post June 30th is everything from where are we from a health perspective in terms of are we still in stay at home, what's happening in DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia, what's happening with our enrollment, what are the expectations in terms of how, as we're bringing things up, where we'll be at that June 30th point in time. What will be happening in the fall in terms of will our students all be coming back, how many will be coming back, and all of that. We have several places where we're working to gather that information, understand the ramifications of our decisions. Fanta, who many of you know, and Dan Nichols have been running a working group, a COVID-19 working group that has over 65 members and from all over the university so that we can bring information and questions in. We've been working as a cabinet, the senior leadership of the university, everybody here, plus Matt Bennett, who does our communications, plus Courtney Searles, our Vice President of Development and Alumni Relations, Trevina Bird, our General Counsel, General Billy Walker, Athletics. We have been meeting on a regular basis daily to work, bring issues in, and make decisions. And so that's how we are moving through. The question of where we are going to be on July 30th, we at this point have made as many decisions as we can, and we're going to continue to gather information, and as soon as we can, we will add to that decision making. I know it's been hard. Sometimes we communicate 2 or 3 times a week, and apologies for those mails, but what we are trying to do is as soon as we get a decision, move it. And gather that information to do that. So right now, in terms of what it will look like on a post-July 1st, that is the planning that we're doing. We have a special group, working group that is academic affairs, as well as our campus life and representatives from all over the university working on our issues of retention and enrollment. And those folks are helping us think through that will affect the decisions. Well, we're working through, Seth and Beth Muha are working on a number of the issues around how we think of what it looks like when we bring up and we do a recovery period, and how we think about issues of safety. And Doug and his team are certainly working on the finance issues to make sure that we can cover that 27 million and be prepared if there are bigger challenges in the fall.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. Next question, will the university allow employees to carry over annual leave beyond the current cap? I'll take this one. We know that during this period with the stay-at-home order and other limitations imposed by COVID-19, people have not been able to travel and perhaps not been able to use their annual leave as much as they would have expected or planned for. Unfortunately, increasing the amount of leave that employees can carry over creates additional financial liability for the university. And as we talked about in the Friday message, and I imagine Doug will talk more about today, figuring about how we limit our financial liability will be a key part of our planning going forward. So at this time, given those issues, we're not going to be able to extend the cap. That said, we did want to note that because of the change in the university's fiscal year, individuals now have until June 30th to use their current days. As you'll recall, we changed the fiscal year led by Doug and his team, and that's given folks several additional months to use the time. And we also wanted to encourage people that while we're on this time of expanded telework, and even though you can't travel, we still encourage people to use their annual leave and to take breaks as they would during the usual year. Even if it means you can't travel, continue to take that time and take care of yourself are important aspects of helping us get through this time. So we're not able to extend the cap. We're trying to continue to think of things we can to support staff. Unfortunately, this is not one of them. Okay, next questions. This one will be going to you, Dan. When will decisions be made on term faculty whose contracts have not yet been renewed?
Thanks, Seth. I just wanted to briefly just repeat and reiterate what Sylvia said in terms of thanking all of you for all the incredible work that you've done. I've seen it in so many ways, and I just wanted to add my voice to that chorus because it has really been impressive and heartening to see this community work so hard together. With respect to faculty contracts, the issue that we're facing, and I think everybody realizes this, is that there's just a huge amount of uncertainty about what the fall is going to look like at this point. And that is a very pivotal issue for us in so many ways as we try to deal with our finances, and we are trying to line up teaching with the demand from students and so forth. And so we're trying to get ahead of that as much as we can, try to figure out what the possible scenarios are, but that will impact the teaching needs that we'll have for the fall semester. And so we are looking at every single case one by one and trying to understand how best to position our teaching, and we will make decisions and move ahead on contracts as quickly as we can. All of the deans have put in information talking about each open or renewable position that they have right now, and we're in the process of going through and evaluating each one of those. I think it's fair to say, though, in all cases that it's a question of when it's either a yes, we can go ahead, or it's a not now, and we have to keep watching as the situation continues to emerge as we go toward the fall. But again, we're trying to recognize it's a very important issue for you. It's a very important issue for the university's functioning in the fall, and we're trying to do the best we can to meet all of the different needs we have, including yours as our instructors. So keep looking for more information, and you can also contact your deans for more updates on what's happening with the specifics in your area of instruction.
Great, thank you, Dan. Next question, when will the university make a decision about whether we will have in-person instruction in the fall? Sylvia, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Seth. The question of the in-person instruction in the fall, as we think about the timing of that decision, we need to bring together, I think, two things. One is the point at which you need to make the decision so that you can have high quality implementation of whatever it is you decide. That there comes a point where you're going to inhibit your ability to execute if you make the decision after that point. The second point is when we have as much information as possible. And that information is really about what is the trajectory of the pandemic, what is the trajectory of how we can get back to what is new normal, and what does that look like. Also, the questions of whether or not we expect another bump in the fall. And so there are many parts to that health part of that we need to know and understand right now. Will we have the testing capability? Will we have the contact tracing capability? Will we have the ability to isolate? What will we know about immunity for those who have had COVID-19? What will we know about the tests that can test for that immunity? What will we know about our expectation of mutation of the virus in terms of the expectations of our ability to treat? Where are we on the trajectory of the burden on the hospital system? Because that's one of the most important things. And there's the burden that we've seen now, which is clear everything out and can we handle the COVID-19 cases? But we need to get to a place where the hospital system and the health system can function regularly. There are many things, as you know, elective and other things that some might not even consider elective, like cancer treatments and other things that are being delayed. All of that feeds into the question of what it will look like for us to come back up, a place with a high density and concentration of people. And so that will also be related to what we learn about our own enrollment. So those are some of the facts when I say gather as much information, and the cross between those points, the point at which we need this much time to do really good execution, and the point at which we have as much information to make the best decisions. And so that's how we're thinking about it. We're working to try and think about what timetable that is. There's a group that involves everyone from the deans to the registrar to our housing folks in campus life, to other members of campus life, to talk about how much information we need, what are the different scenarios. And that's what we're doing right now, is scenario planning. And that scenario planning will help us get to clarity of how many of these pieces of information that I described will you need to know, and at what point will you need to do execution. So that's how we're thinking about getting to the point where we make that decision. We're also in conversations and watching what our colleagues are doing so that we can learn from other institutions as well.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. Next question. Will tenure and promotion files for actions that have already been initiated continue? Dan, we'll turn to you.
Sure. Yeah, so the process with respect to tenure and promotion is already complete for the year, except for just being approved by the board. So all of that will go to the board at the May meeting, and that it'll be complete. So we are moving ahead with the tenure and promotion process. I would just remind everyone that if a faculty member is pre-tenure, that we had added a year to the tenure clock for those folks in recognition of the interruption that occurred during this semester, and how that affects each individual faculty member slightly different depending on where they are in their pre-tenure track time. But each faculty member either will or has already received a letter explaining the specifics for their particular case and the ability to opt out of that if they don't want to take that extra year. So all of that's moving forward according to the steps outlined in the faculty manual, with the exception of the additional year that we added for pre-tenure folks.
Great, thank you, Dan. Doug, we're going to turn to you. How is the university approaching financial planning in light of the impacts and uncertainty caused by COVID-19?
Thank you. So we know that COVID-19 has impacted families in several ways. Their net worth, investments have probably been affected. We've seen the massive unemployment out there. And so all of this brings additional uncertainty to what we're thinking about for the fall, just as Sylvia had mentioned. So we've been developing multiple scenarios of whether we might have a fall that with a 10% enrollment reduction up to a 25% enrollment reduction. We're looking at online only. And if you think about online only, that means our residence halls are empty. So there's a revenue shortfall there. we're doing the same for graduate enrollment and running models there. So what we're really trying to do is build stress tests at these different scenarios to figure out what the financial impact will be. And of course, the uncertainties of this, it's just the dynamic nature of this issue. It keeps changing. So we're continuing to adjust these models. We will continue to adjust them as we know more and as there's less uncertainty going forward.
Fanta and Dan, you might want to add, because one of the things Doug just mentioned, the models that we're building and the scenarios that we need to plan for. Because we know some of the very important elements, we're a highly tuition and fee dependent institution, and we know that, we are already taking the steps and taking actions to make sure we're doing everything we can to both land our flag and to retain. And Fanta or Dan, do you want to add anything in terms of some of those steps, whether it's orientation, webinars that we're communicating, any of that? I think it would be helpful for folks to know and understand. Some of the people on this call are deeply involved in that, thank you, but others may not, and it might be helpful for them to hear that.
Thank you, Sylvia. So I would say that going back to this piece about, what will the fall look like and the importance of scenario planning, I cannot emphasize that enough. Through the COVID working group, that is a cross-functional group that involves not only academic affairs, but also campus life and our many operational, including communications and Office of Information Technology. The benefit of such a cross-functional group is because people come from different perspectives and have information on the ground, because they're often the one also executing that. So as we're looking at the fall, and the more important piece is retention and enrollment. And so as we're beginning to plan for that, there are a couple of things that we have tried to work on in different facets. One is, we know that with the summer, we've moved to online, but also our orientation program has moved to online, and we are looking at how do we best engage students and families in orientation. As part of our gathering of information, we've been spending a lot of time with families. And one of the things about AU is that we attract students from all around the country and the world. And it's really important for us to understand what's going on the ground with families as they're making decisions about enrollments for the fall. Whether it is the issue of distance, how important is distance for them? What's their financial situation that may have evolved over this period of time? One of the draws for families and for students in coming to AU is the experiential education. What might that look like in the immediate? These are all questions that we must ask ourselves, but in asking ourselves, we really need to have boots to the ground to understand from the families, from the students, what they're thinking. For our returning students, it's also understanding developmentally where they are, as well as what are some of their expectations with the fact that internships this summer, for most, will not happen. Students count on jobs over the summer to kind of close the gap. So understanding those different dynamics and understanding how that impacts retention, how that impacts enrollment is vitally important. And having a cross-functional group that is not only listening to what we're hearing on the ground, but then take that information to then ask the so what question. What does that mean? In addition, we are really looking at some of the surveys that are out there that are letting us know what do we know right now, knowing that that will evolve. It's very important for us to gather as much information from all different sources. As we begin to lay the groundwork for planning for the coming academic year, it's everything you mentioned. Social distance, what would that look like in a classroom? What does that look like in a residence hall? What does that look like in an event space? It is health and safety. What does that look like for students, but also for faculty, for staff, for the community that we're in? Those are all the things that we are spending time on, and it has really taken a village to kind of take a look at this. And I have to say that the boots on the ground, the amount of sort of commitment that we've seen across the campus has been incredibly heartening for the work that we have ahead of us. And yes, there is a lot of uncertainty, but what we will want to do is to make sure that as we gather facts, that we're bringing those facts back to a larger group for their input.
Dan.
I will say that the early indicators are very positive. You probably know that we had a record number of applicants to American University this year. The brand is strong and people are very attracted to being here. We had over 20,000 applications this year. And so far, as we've been moving through the deposit process, our numbers look very good. They're ahead of last year substantially. But we also know that from the surveys that Fanta just mentioned, that somewhere around 20% of students are reporting that they're reconsidering what their plans are for the fall. Not our students, which is the national sample, but that's, that puts a lot of uncertainty even on these good numbers that we're seeing. We're just starting into registration for the fall for our ongoing students, and even though we're a short time into it, we've had very strong registration for the fall, so people are indicating that they're coming back. But again, that they might end up with some kind of pause if we're totally online, or there's some other factor in terms of the trajectory of the virus and so forth that changes their thinking about things. So we're still watching that, but so far there's not bad news about any of that, and we're heartened by that. It means something to us, not just in terms of our finances, but in terms of telling us that we're giving people a good experience and they want to be part of it, and that's a very good thing.
And I think one of the key things that we're also learning, going back to what Dan talked about, is that some of the indicators that we would have used in the past, we have to look at different indicators now, right? We know what were some of the metrics that tells us how we're doing on enrollments. We know what was some of the metrics that tells us how we're doing on retention. We now need to imagine different metrics because those goalposts have changed. So the more we can engage with our different constituents and the more we can learn from our students and their families and from our faculty and our staff around how the environment has changed will help us to be more planful as we begin to look at the academic year.
And Fanta, as a follow-up question we're getting from some folks, people want to know if you can share a little bit about what you're hearing from the admitted students about what our admitted students at AU about what they're thinking about as they're considering whether to come to AU.
Thank you, Seth. So we've held several webinars with students, and thanks to the good work of lots of people who may be listening here, and it's really taking again the village. In addition to webinars, is really staying the course with families and with students. And what we're hearing are a couple of things. I think, as Dan mentioned, there is interest in American University, and students who have applied with a specific purpose and intent in mind, and those pieces have not changed. What we are hearing from families are things around health and safety, which is not unique to American University. It will be all around the country and the world. So we're hearing questions around safety and health. We're also hearing questions around finances, which again, as we're seeing the economic condition change around the country and the world, there are more questions around the finances. Our Office of Financial Aid and others are really working hard in those different domain areas. So we're hearing some questions about that. And then the more important piece that we're hearing, I think, from families and from students is they want to engage with American University. When they made the decision to apply, when they made the decision about American University, it was because of that engagement, and they want to continue to engage with us. So more than ever, where I think each and every one on this call can help and beyond this call is we all need to continue to engage with our students. We need to continue to engage with our families as we proceed. And I think that's going to be really, really important. But the differentiators and the strength are still being recognized as far as the families are concerned. We did hear, from some students about, should I take a semester off? Should I take a gap year? What should I be doing? And again, that's evolving. None of this is set in stone. As we continue our conversations with families, we're hearing more about that. We're hearing families interested in advanced credit. I think this idea of being able to finish college earlier, both from a time and a cost perspective, is really attractive to families and students. So we're certainly getting that kind of information that's coming in from students, and folks across campus are responding to those as they're coming in.
Great, thanks, Fanta. Sylvia, we're going to turn back to you. What will the university do to ensure employee safety when they return to campus?
So, at this point in time, this question is actually relevant because we have folks, some of our essential folks on campus. I think most folks here know that there are a group of students that are there. Certainly AUPD and others are there, and we have taken a number of steps to make sure that those folks are safe in the current context. And that is everything from supplying masks. In some cases, we're even supplying masks for folks to use at home. In their home settings. We are making sure that people have the right information that they need. We've done several webinars, including webinars that impact our Airmark employees, and those we had Spanish translation to make sure that people are getting the information in a way that they can receive and be comfortable, so that they have the knowledge about how to protect themselves and what needs to be done. We are working on how, even with those that are here now, how that they work in ways in terms of an individual comes in but others don't, and don't work in the ways that they historically have. So we've started down that path in terms of the people that are here now. And this is part of the information. When I said the information we need, today we even, everybody actually on the screen, we had a conversation about the recovery plan for our workforce and how to think about what that looks like in terms of the questions of everything from testing to what if we're asked to do the contact tracing? What would that look like? So what we're trying to do is be informed by what we're seeing in terms of potential recovery plans and the knowledge that we have. We're using what we have now with the folks on campus, but as more knowledge becomes available in terms of everything from transmissibility to the steps that I think the community writ large, not just the AU community will be taking to make sure that we reopen safely and do that in a way that prevents further spread of COVID-19. So a number of steps now and the planning for what we would do on that recovery.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. We've gotten a question about whether this will be recorded so people can watch it later, or those who weren't able to join, and the answer to that is yes. Doug, we're going to turn back to you. We've received a question: has the university received funding from the federal government through the CARES Act?
Seth, yes, we have. We're going to receive about $6.3 million from the CARES Act. Half of that will go directly to students, to aid students who have been impacted by COVID-19 crisis, and the other money will be able to be used by us to cover costs that were unanticipated from this, whether that is the money we had to refund for housing, meal plans, etc.
And I would just add that as soon as the application information was out, I mean, we have already applied. Our application, I think, had to be one of the first. Sarah Belson, who has helped us with that. Sarah, if you're on, thank you so much. We went back and forth every time there was new information, and Sarah would redo the application and send it for signature, and redo it and send it for signature. And so I think American University may be, hopefully, very high in the queue, not just because we begin with A, but because folks on the teams have done the hard work to make sure we get that in so that we can move that money quickly to the university.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. We have a few follow-up questions to our previous questions. Dan, we'll turn first to you. We got a question about following up on your answer on the tenure cases. What about tenure or promotion cases that come up next year following this May's board meeting?
Unless people will have the extra year if they wish, so they don't have to go up next year if it's their final year. They could delay 1 year, but there's also an option for them to not take advantage of that 1 year. If you're ready to go and you want to go, you'll just need to notify your dean so that you can proceed with the procedure. But we will continue with the same process at this point, so we don't anticipate any changes.
Great, thank you, Dan. Another question, Sylvia, maybe we'll start with you on this one. Is the university considering extending the May 1st deposit deadline for undergrads?
We will be having a meeting tomorrow in terms of, I will be meeting, actually, this group together, of course, with Sharon Alston, her team, will be meeting on that issue tomorrow. Dan, you may, or Fanta, you may know what we will be discussing, but we have, at this point in time, we have not extended. And a number of universities have not. I think what we'll be doing, so you'll know, is evaluating where we are. Dan shared some of that information in terms of where we are on deposits. What we'll want to be thinking about is, as Fanta mentioned, this question of melt. And so our usual measures of the deposit, is the deposit as much of an indicator, and how do we think through that? So right now, it is May 1st. If you know anybody out there, get them to do it, get it done. Let's get it done. But we are continuing. This is one of the things about movement of information and being nimble. I think the university has, AU and our entire teams have had to be so nimble. We gather information, things change very quickly, and we need to keep gathering, keep listening, and keep evaluating and doing that quickly and communicating that quickly. But for now, May 1st is the deadline.
Great, thank you. Doug, we're going to turn back to you. We received a question as will or how building maintenance continue given the freeze on capital work and capital projects that was announced on Friday?
We're going to be only doing projects that we need to do to maintain the physical plant, so there's not deterioration. We did put a halt on all capital construction after we complete the Hall of Science. So it's really a matter of doing the work that we need to do to keep the physical plant operational, but not cosmetic work or other things that we can defer.
Great, thank you, Doug. And we got a related question on, will the campus plan process continue?
The campus plan process will continue, and that is, it's a 10-year plan, and it speaks to the future. So we want to continue that process. We've had a really good working relationship with our neighbors. We've been at it for over a year now, and actually we have a meeting tonight at 6 o'clock with the neighbors, and the neighbors would like it to continue as well. So we see that going forward, this is the prudent thing to do.
Great, thank you, Doug. Fanta, we're going to come back to you. We received a question about our international students, both current and future, and in light of recent news, if you could just speak a little bit to that and what you anticipate over the summer and the fall.
So yes, in terms of international students and international enrollment, is certainly something that I think all universities in the US and other parts of the world that are receiving countries like Australia, Canada, the US, and UK, all rightfully so concerned about in light of COVID-19 and the impact. I think it's safe to say that there are a couple of things that we will have to closely watch for. One is really, what will this do for mobility of students? What will parents think about mobility of students given distance? But also, frankly, in the case of the US, prior to COVID-19, there was already a chilly climate for international students as we looked at travel bans, we looked at some of the discussions around immigration, et cetera. I know this morning my inbox was flooded with colleagues asking questions about the most recent tweet that was about immigration and so forth. It's important for our community to understand that it may be a bit nuanced, but there's a difference between immigrants and non-immigrants. Our international students fit into the non-immigrant category, so I just want to make sure that we understand that nuance a little bit. But it is the case that certainly for our students being back home, some of the concerns that will come up will be timetable for visa issuance if their visas have expired. It is also even simple things as passport, because different governments have also had to close, and if you need a new passport, those are things that are going to take some time. And then also flight arrangements and airlines, and what does that look like in terms of timetable to come back. So for an institution, and for any institution that has looked at international education, there's definitely a lot of conversations about what does the future hold for international education. I do think families still do have an interest in having their students be able to get really quality education. And so the question really that's going to remain, I think, for all of us as we think about our retention, as we think about our enrollments, is how does American University, in the work that we've been doing, particularly with international students, can really continue to do that important work and can continue to engage our students and their families in all the ways they can. With COVID-19, we had encouraged students who could stay in the US to do so, understanding that those who had to go home to their loved ones needed to do that. Our International Student and Scholar Services continue to work very closely with students and their families so that we can make sure we get as many back as we can when things are safe and when we can do so. But yes, I think it's safe to say that all around the US, we should anticipate a drop in enrollment of international students across the board, and not just in the US, but in other places of the world as well.
Great, thank you, Fanta. We received a question about what the performance management process will look like for this year, and I'll take this one. Performance management is a critical aspect of, I think, professional development and helping people grow. This year, we totally understand that folks' goals have been impacted by COVID-19. We also, as we announced on Friday, are largely not going to be having the merit program. So we are working on guidance for how to do a modified performance management process to make sure people have the feedback and the conversations with their supervisors to help grow, but conscious of the changes that have happened, given the changes in how we're working and the impact of COVID-19. So more to come on that, and it will come well in advance of the process over the summer. Next question, Dan, we're going to turn back to you. With the hiring freeze, will the searches for the School of Communication Dean, Law School Dean, and some of the other senior academic positions continue? Dan, I think you're on mute still. There you go.
There. Okay. Looks like there's 3 or 4 different ways to mute yourself, and I'm taking advantage of all of them, apparently. At any rate, yeah, those 3 searches will continue. Those are critical positions that we need to get people in seat for, and we're in the very late stages of all 3 of those. And so we're going to push through and finish those 3 searches. So.
Great, thank you, Dan. We received a related question about how long will the hiring freeze be in place. I'll start, and then Sylvia, you may want to follow. Right now, we're not sure. As Sylvia mentioned and Doug mentioned, we're evaluating the financial impact of everything that happens. We're waiting to see what happens over the summer, which so far is promising, and what happens in the fall. Our goal, as we mentioned in the note on Friday, is to put the university in the strongest possible financial position to manage through whatever comes. And so for now, we don't have a date certain for when it will go. We're conscious of how it impacts people and operations, and so we will continue to monitor it and determine when the best time is to either lift it or modify it. This is something that's a regular subject of conversation amongst the cabinet. Sylvia, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
No, thank you, Seth. I think that covered it. As I said, we will just continue to see. I think we are as a university, in what I like to call prudent, not panicked, in terms of even in a time of deep, deep uncertainty. You can hear from the scenarios we're doing, it's a very uncertain time, and we see what other institutions are doing in terms of universities, and even just the Chronicle today, a lot of very severe steps already at other institutions, and we see what's happening around the country in terms of people who are our families at the university in terms of those unemployment rates. But I think right now we will keep people informed as we can, but I think, Seth, you covered where we are.
Great, thank you. Fanta, we're going to turn back to you. We received a question: how can we best support our students, staff, and faculty who may be subject to discrimination or stereotyping as a result of the COVID-19 dynamics?
Great question, and I appreciate particularly this question. It goes without saying that in this unprecedented time, we're also seeing behaviors that are not, that's heartbreaking. And that's, in numerous forms that this come up in subtle and in not so subtle ways. I think All of you received my memo in particular that talked about some of the treatment of our Asian and Asian American communities. I think that's important for all of us to not only have heightened awareness around these things, but the first and most important thing that I think we all need to do is to first educate ourselves about these issues, and to really do everything we can to not be participants in this kind of behavior. The more important piece is we really do need to reach out to members of our community, and that's across the board. It is our members of our community who often will be targeted as folks who, based on ignorance and frankly just based on bias of all form, it runs the gamut. It is also our members of our community who have different lived realities and lived experiences. I've talked about the socioeconomic piece of this, and we saw that as we move to online, not everyone has access to the same equipment. And so our response to those are incredibly important, and speed of response is very important as we move forward with it. As COVID-19 is hitting different parts of the country, we will be hearing from some about how for folks who will be coming from New York, we need to be careful. Folks coming from X part, and you can fill in the blanks. So for me, the way you first start by helping is to educate yourself. You really need to educate yourself about these issues and know that it's real. The second part is you need to reach out. You need to reach out intentionally, and in reaching out, do not take away people's ability to be empowered. And so it becomes really important to ask, what is it that can be of support, and not assume. Those things become incredibly important. I think what needs to guide our work is really understanding community in its broader sense, and really understanding fully the issues of equity and how equity plays out in our communities, whether it's small c or large c. Those are some of the ways. And for faculty and staff who are particularly spending time with students, understand that this is really a very challenging time for our students. Many of them left campus without really having the closure, and they've talked a lot about that. They've gone back to all parts of the world and the country where they've had to readjust. So this is not normal time in any of the ways that we know normal time, and particularly for our younger folks, they need support, and they need to be seen, and they need to be heard. And also the same goes for all of us as community members, whether we're staff or whether we're faculty. This idea of a community of care, I cannot overemphasize how critically important this notion of community of care is at this time and for the months to come.
Great, thank you, Fanta. Doug, we're going to turn to you, although I'm also happy to help out. We've received a question that some of the folks who are still on campus have noticed that some of the neighbors are still using the athletic facilities or other things to walk around. What guidance have we provided to people about using athletic facilities, outdoor athletic facilities at the campus?
We've posted the facilities with signs at Reeves Field and the tennis courts, the basketball courts. We've also sent new email out to the listserv, the neighbors, to tell them that the fields are closed, the courts are closed. So we're doing everything we can, and we continue to experience that issue ourselves.
Great, thank you, Doug. Well, we're coming to the end of our time together, but we have one last question, and Sylvia, will start with you. We've received several variations of this question about what are ways that we AU community members can help.
You know, I love that that was one of the questions we heard so much, and we have heard it. We've heard it, as I mentioned, from our alumni. We hear it from so many people, and it's just a wonderful reflection of who makes up the American University community. And I'll start, and then let's turn to everybody. I'm going to suggest two places to focus in terms of helping. One is I'm going to build off the point that Fanta was just talking about, which is the issue of support and how we support each other. And as Fanta said, one cannot assume, but this question of how, you know, some people like you sending the video with the music playing, you know, in terms of the band and all the different, you know, those kinds of things. Some like the poster with the cat going, hang in there. And, you know, different people want different things in terms of support, but let's support each other during this time. And just even the thought that you're reaching out, I think often is a form of that support. The second thing is, you know, it is number one for us as an institution as we think about this is how do we land this class and keep our students that we have? You know, that enrollment and retention would be the other thing. And what role do you play? Because it is retail. It is everything that creates that experience that these students have. And so right now that is a really important part of our focus because it really defines how we will go forward on a number of fronts and a number of the places where we've had lots of questions today. So I'll start with those two and turn it to others. Doug.
Sure, I would say in addition to supporting each other, I think just supporting ourselves. It's hard to be hunkered down, and so I think it's important to make sure that we're continuing at least the same level of physical activity that we did before, if not enhancing it, whether that's in the house or outdoors with social distancing, as Sylvia always reminds us.
Good. Fanta?
First, keep doing what you're doing. It's working. I've seen it across our campus. And so please continue to do that as the first. The second is, I think the way we can support is understanding that yes, COVID-19 knows no borders, race and so forth, but however, it has not affected everyone in the same way. We have seen these issues of equity being very pronounced, and it's really important that we individually, collectively understand the impact of that, and then what can we do about that? We're a higher education institution, and it is about knowledge. It is about what we can do in terms of impact. And so one of the ways that we can do that is to really leverage that we're a higher education institution and understand that this has had differentiated impact on different communities. How do we understand that? What impact can we have is going to be incredibly important. Lastly, as Sylvia mentioned, we have among us students who are really afraid. This is a very challenging time, and for all the reasons that we can imagine. Please continue to reach out. Please continue to take care of each other and to be there for each other. That is going to be incredibly important for each and every one of us.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that impresses me is the sort of infinite creativity of this community, and we are facing circumstances that we've never had to deal with before. And so I think one thing that you can contribute is your insight and your ideas. You know, some of you have experience from elsewhere. I was just talking to a faculty member from the law school yesterday who was at Tulane at the time of Katrina and had some interesting ideas about things that might help from that experience. So I don't care how crazy it is. You know, I don't know, you think we should start growing avocados at Airlie or something. It doesn't matter. Get those ideas out here to us because we have got so many good ones already from the community and things that we hadn't thought of as we're facing a brand new world here that we're going to have to continue to be negotiating for some long time out from now. And so I just want to thank you for what you've contributed that way so far and just ask you to keep them coming because they have been extremely helpful. So thank you and keep it going.
Great, thanks, Dan. I'll just add, I echoed everything everyone said. I'll just add that I know many of our staff are really working overtime. I think some have some additional capacity given the changes we are and how we've adopted our model. Human Resources has created a program where if you do have some additional capacity, you can help in other areas that really need help. Fanta's team has already taken advantage of some of these opportunities. I think it's a great opportunity to contribute. It's a great opportunity to learn about other parts of the university if you do have that capacity. So if you do, we encourage you to reach out to Human Resources, and they have a plan to help match you up with something that takes the best advantage of your skills and interests and allows to continue to build, make your contributions to build the university community. Well, thank you, Sylvia and Doug and Fanta and Dan for taking the time to answer all these questions. And thanks to everyone who joined today. As I mentioned, we received many questions. We weren't able to answer them all today, although I think we covered a good number of them. But we will continue to share information through the FAQs, through additional webinars, through the deans and the vice presidents. And if you have questions, please reach out to any of them. You can reach on the website to let us know. And as Sylvia said, we will try to get information out to you as best we can and as quickly as we can, understanding that we're not always going to have all the answers right away. So thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.